afternoon to all of our viewers, and I would like to talk today about something that's really been on my heart. We recently had our first in-person event with Art of Feminine. We also attended another event, Unapologetic, with Melinda Bam and Melissa Swart, which was fantastic. But the common theme that is coming through discussions with various ladies is the issue of abuse. And I thought today we would talk about when to walk away. And it's based loosely on a discussion by Pastor R.C. Blakes online on YouTube. We'll try to post the link as well for our ladies below this video, called When to Walk Away. And it's one of the best videos that I have seen from a pastoral perspective in terms of practical solutions when you are in a very abusive relationship. And what Pastor R.C. Blakes does is that he takes on the religious community, and he says that he is very tired of seeing people in highly abusive relationships where they are seeking guidance from the religious community and they are being met with very legalistic religious input, which may well be exceptionally dangerous given the abusive situation. And I completely agree with Pastor R.C. Blakes. From the outset, I would like to say that as someone with over a decade's experience in high conflict divorce, I can tell you that the chances of a relationship marred with ongoing abuse ever recovering or coming right is exceptionally remote. I have never seen it in practice. And the reason why is because when a relationship is that unhealthy, that toxic, that volatile, it's foundational. And there are so many problems where the problems actually act as what we call triggers for abuse. In other words, the two people in that situation are ongoing triggers for each other to bring out the worst in one another. And there is no amount of counseling or mediation or prayer, quite frankly, which can really resolve something that's pathological and foundational. And I genuinely believe as a Christian that if you've got someone who you know who's in a highly abusive situation, or if you are in a highly abusive situation, to advise them pastorally that they must just go back to that situation and make it work because of a marital vow, it is exceptionally dangerous advice. And it's dangerous for a number of reasons. The first is it even a marriage? One talks about a marital covenant before God. And I genuinely have to wonder sometimes whether the covenant has anything to do with God whatsoever. Because if you analyze the inception of a relationship, God had nothing to do with it. He had nothing to do with the selection of the partner, whether the decision or not, whether or not to get married, whether or not this was a relationship that he condoned and that he approved of. His face was never sought at all in the relationship. And in fact, what you may well find in a Christian setting with highly abusive relationships is that at engagement stage or before, you may well find that wise counsel, Christian counsel, probably informed one or both of the parties that they were worried about the relationship and they expressed concern about the best interests of one or more of the parties. And they went ahead and got married anyway. But that being said, even if it is a marriage, I think biblically, and it is also discussed by Pastor R.C. Blakes, that if you've got a situation where there's an ongoing pattern of abuse, that is a fundamental breach of any marital covenant. And we serve a God who utterly abhors abuse. He abhors it. He hates oppression and bullying. And two particular Bible verses that I can quote in that regard is Amos 3 and Malachi 2 verse 16. We serve a God who does not like oppression, and particularly of the vulnerable. But I think that what we must remember is this issue of the foundational problems of an abusive relationship. And what it really does mean is that you've got two people who are entirely incompatible. And compatibility is completely different to chemistry. And what by and large you find, particularly nowadays, is that nobody actually even knows what compatibility is, and they don't know how to assess it. All they care about is chemistry. If they feel attracted to the person, then the relationship is given a go-ahead. And the other problem that we're facing nowadays is that people are having sexual relationships very quickly, and what that does is that severely clouds the judgment, because all of a sudden, from a Christian perspective, you have a situation of what we call a soul tie, and your soul is essentially your emotions and your will. And now all of a sudden your will and your emotions are not working on a clear basis, on an objective basis, where you can look at this individual and say, is this individual good for me? Does he bring out the best in me, or she bring out the best in me? All of a sudden now, all of that is clouded by a sexual experience where you've become intimate with a person, and you are no longer afforded that space to stand back and pray about it and to really think a little bit more clinically and objectively. And we've said before on these programs that another problem that we face in conjunction with this is that we live in a society where it is unheard of for people to be happy in their singlehood. And I can't tell you the damage that it is doing to women and to men, where there's this feeling, there's this terrible pressure that you just must be involved. Just get a man no matter what the cost. And it is so damaging and so destructive, because you're taking a very unhappy, unfulfilled, unhealthy single person who's not ready for a relationship, and then you're putting them into a unhealthy, unhappy, unfulfilled relationship. So you've got two negatives coming to the party. You've got two people who have not done the hard work to make sure that they are happy single people, and they are expecting a relationship to provide them with the affirmation and fulfillment that they lacked in their singlehood. So I can tell you, as someone who's come out of a bad relationship and who's found tremendous healing in the last few years, that singlehood is difficult, but it's very peaceful and very fulfilling if you can find that the singlehood journey is a way to serve your purpose in God. That I have found is that in my singlehood, God has definitely put me to his purpose. But it is not easy, but it is certainly a lot easier than being in a terrible relationship which is unhealthy and toxic and abusive. And abusive relationships, essentially what they do is demolish a person's self-worth and self-value. That is always the undercurrent of abusive situations. And as a Christian, I believe that that is demonic. That is demonic. That is not from a holy living God that we serve. God does not break his children down and demean them and demolish them and steal their sense of self-worth and self-value. He is the complete opposite. We serve a loving God who sent his only begotten Son to die for us in the worst possible way, and who rose again on the third day. He is victorious, and he is a king, and you are part of a kingdom. And there's so much value in that. There's so much worth in that. You've been purchased by the King of Kings. And if you're in a situation that deprives you of that, then what essentially will happen is that you will not be living your life in terms of a purpose for God. You cannot be put to purpose for God because you're in a war all the time. You're trying to just survive day to day in terms of not being distracted by a relationship that has been kind of set in motion to utterly destroy you. So I would also encourage Christians listening to this video, if you know someone in an abusive relationship, then please handle the situation with sensitivity and with practical reality. Because what we're seeing through this particular ministry is that women and men who are being advised to simply just go back to the situation that's killing them, is invariably, that is a very, very dangerous situation, because what we see in legal practice is that that may well lead to certain things such as femicide, which is very prevalent in South Africa. It may lead to family murders, which are prevalent in South Africa, and it may well lead to suicide. And I can say that from a male perspective, the suicide is what we see in abusive relationships. Men do not generally reach out for help. They do not generally seek counseling. And when they are in a situation where a woman is utterly tearing down their sense of self-worth and self-esteem, we have seen cases of suicide. So you must handle the situation practically. And Pastor R.C. Blakes describes it as follows. Imagine a person is in the sea, drowning, and there's a storm, and the waves are crashing and drowning this particular individual. And the individual stops and says, "Please, sea, stop being a sea. Please, waves, stop being a wave. Be nice to me. In fact, you owe me an apology." It's never going to happen. The answer to prayer would be for that person to get out of the sea that's drowning him or her, and to find dry land and to get as far away from the sea as is possible. And I feel that with religious advice that we're seeing, it's almost as if people are drowning in a sewer, and the religious community is standing on the periphery saying, well, let's just pray for you. And let's hope that, as Pastor R.C. Blake says, you can go back into a cage with a lion and you won't be mauled to death. And it is terribly, terribly frustrating. And what we're seeing is that a lot of people are saying to me and to other people, I don't want to go to church anymore. I feel like there's the standard in church now where couples have to be the Brady Bunch. I don't meet the standard. I'm not getting help. In fact, I keep getting sent back to a man who's hitting me and abusing my children, and I just want to hide away. And the damage that is being done through religiosity and through legalism is profound. It's profound. And I just want to read the definition of abuse, the legal definition of abuse from the Domestic Violence Act. Domestic violence means the following: physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional, verbal, and psychological abuse, economic abuse, intimidation, harassment, stalking, damage to property, any other controlling or abusive behavior towards a complainant. So the definition is broad. And what it also means is that it doesn't take a man to be hitting you in the face or kicking you or kicking your children for an abusive situation to exist. We have certain individuals who've come through our programs where they can't even go for a cup of coffee. Ladies who have no sense of individual life whatsoever because their husbands dominate every single minute of their time. They have no friends, they have no family relationships anymore either. They are prevented from these situations because their husbands control every minute of their lives, and that is a pattern of abuse. So I would advise you all that if there is a pattern, and a pattern exists if it happens more than once, if it happens twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, there's a pattern of abuse and a pattern of domestic violence. I would implore you to find robust, practical Christian input from pastors such as Pastor R.C. Blakes, and to take a practical way forward that could potentially save you physically in the long run.